be here in Cosumnes River College. Thank you, Cosumnes River, for having us here. The reason why we chose Cosumnes River is because through their Enriched Scholars Program, they've been able to grow from 2008, 22 young people in foster care to now a number of 74. So that's a pretty incredible amount of young people that have now entered the college system. So I'm very happy to announce that. Today we're gathered with our partners, the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute. Folks, we've got congressional leaders in Washington, D.C. Ann, can you turn off your volume, please?
You won't be able to see it happen, but they'll cue you when the camera's
I'm sorry, we have Chapin Hall. Ann, can
you'll
you
be able to see yourself?
Can you turn them down?
Right there, or actually, I guess there's these two windows right there.
Oh, sorry. Who's talking?
That are going to be live all the time, but the main screen's not going to feed.
Oh, sorry. Can the Senate? Can you turn them down?
So you can
excuse me.
off so that I can't see myself.
So we're gathered here today for a national conversation on the intersection of education and foster care. The reason why this is so important is because right now in Washington, D.C., the Senate Health Committee is starting to discuss markup of No Child Left Behind, otherwise known as the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So right now, this is a very hot topic in D.C., and the Congressional Coalition and Fostering Media Connections are today releasing an action guide that outlines how everybody from your everyday citizens to political leaders can get involved with ameliorating the foster care system and improving the educational outcomes for children in foster care. We're hoping that by the end of this webcast, the thing is that we had to essentially create our own TV station to talk about these things. So the purpose of this webcast is to look at the intersection of education and foster care as also a window into the broader reforms that are possible to the whole education system, and then look at vulnerable children as a way to understanding that. To that end, we've got great guests from the University of Chicago at Chapin Hall, the Senate Recording Studio, where we have some Senate leaders and leaders from the administration, as well as some foster youth interns with the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, and we'll be hearing from Representative Bass, who's left California's State Senate to join the Congress in D.C. and help fight for these issues at that level. So I want to introduce those people that are on our panel. We have Mike Jones, who's an educator from Laguna Creek High School, who founded Courageous Connection, which helps link current foster youth up with services, created a homeroom type class, which we're going to hear a little bit more about. We've got Carrie Summer, who went through Mike Jones' Courageous Connections class, and we'll be discussing that with us a bit later. And we have Jatane Hart, who was a former foster youth intern with the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, worked in the communications department for Senator Landrieu, and now works for the Alameda County Office of Education, working as an educational mentor, ensuring that children in foster care have their educational services met. So with that, I would like to hear briefly from Jatane about your experiences personally and your experiences now working with children in foster care as an educational mentor. So Jatane?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here. As Daniel said, I am now educational mentor for foster kids in Alameda County. And every day that I work with these young people, I feel very fortunate to have grown up in a very small town. I grew up in foster care in Ukiah, California, and because it was such a small community, I didn't change schools every placement. I had very small classroom sizes, which meant that I had personal relationships with my teachers. They were not just my teachers, they were my neighbors. I saw them at the grocery store, they knew my foster parents. And so if I was in trouble or not going to school or getting bad grades, my parents knew immediately. They would get phone calls, and there was this sense of accountability that I wasn't going to let my foster parents down, I wasn't going to let myself down, or my teachers. I feel like For me, I was in foster care for 9 years, and I didn't change because of placement one time. Very, very fortunate. And school became my outlet of escape. I used that as a place to have control over what I did. I may not have been able to choose what house I lived in, or who my family was, but I did and was able to choose how well I did in school, and it really was my way of controlling my environment, and it really served well for me. Now working with young people, I have 17 young girls that I work with Alameda County Office of Education, and I am shocked at some of the, I guess, the level of deficiency in credit some of my young people have. I have young women who are 6 years old with 0 credits, and we are expecting them to try to recover those credits and then graduate either with a diploma or with a
asking for special treatment or begging to be let in. You can provide those simple things and get that buy-in, and that trickles down to an increased attendance and an increased participation in activities and a happier kid all around.
Well, Mike, thank you very much for that. Thanks for putting a kind of precision on that. Here in California, you had quite a bit of work around these issues going back to the 70s, if Kim can remind me correctly. I mean, that was the beginning of the pilot sites that became foster youth services in 1981, which created liaisons in the offices of education throughout the state. So, back in 1981, California was essentially leading the charge on what would become the prevailing thoughts on how to deal with vulnerable children more broadly and foster children particularly. So, it's important to note that California has had a lot of progress in this development. Also in 2003, there was the enactment of AB 490, which allowed students to stay in their school of origin. So, when you get pulled, and this is something that is being discussed on the federal level right now, when you get pulled from your biological home, the question is whether or not you should stay in that school of origin, whether being moved to a different school district should preclude you from being allowed to stay in that school where you had some level of stability. Now, this is something that's a very good point of debate, because if a child is pulled from a school, and the Chapin Hall research will support this, that sometimes children are pulled from schools that are really underperforming, and it may be in the best interest to move that child. So the thing is we're trying to, and California has kind of led the way on breaking down barriers that would otherwise keep young people from finding that stability which helps them succeed. And AB 490 was part of a continuum of programs and policy that has got us to where we are at Cosumnes River College, which is important to note because, of course, Cosumnes River, you guys are living out the embodiment of AB 12, which extended foster care to age 21 in California, which will start to be implemented in January. So that we're seeing that California's really made an effort to focus not just on the safety of children in foster care or the permanency of children in foster care, but really creating an educational pipeline. And that's the reason why we came here, because we wanted to see this educational pipeline. And a big leader in that push around AB 12, and a big leader on all these issues around children in foster care has been Karen Bass. And I know we're in Sacramento right now, and everybody remembers the assembly member turned state senator, turned state senate president, Karen Bass, and what she was able to do. And I'm hoping that we have Karen, Representative Bass, hooked up from Los Angeles right now, because Representative Bass is now being able to take what she's learned in Sacramento and on California level and move it into the federal conversation at the congressional level. So, Representative Bass, thank you so much for taking some time and joining us today. How are you?
You're welcome. I'm happy to be with you today.
So, can you tell us a little bit about what you're taking to the federal level from your around the intersection of education and foster care from your experience here in California?
Sure, and I do just have to make one minor correction in respect to my colleague, Senate President Darrell Steinberg. I actually was in the State Assembly. I never went to the State Senate.
Sorry, very
and,
sorry.
and
Very sorry.
I was Assembly Speaker, but thank you very much for the opportunity to join you today. And I really just want to take a moment and thank the coalition, the Congressional Coalition on Adoption and Fostering Media Connections team for the work that you're doing today. I've been in Congress just 10 short months. I'm very happy to be there and excited with the idea that hopefully I can be there for a while and actually be able to continue the work that we were doing in California. We all know how important it is to address the needs of education for foster youth, and that's particularly in concern in California, but around the country as we're in this economic crisis, because unfortunately in many state budgets and nationally, when we're making cuts, what gets cut? What gets cut is education, and when you're cutting education for everyone, you know that has an extra devastating impact for youth in the foster care system. So what we were able to accomplish during the time I was there, we did have 1 year actually had additional revenue in our state, and so we did put a package of bills together that increased funding for foster youth, and led by current state Senator Mark Leno, who focused on the educational achievement of foster youth. We were able to increase funding for the Foster Youth Services Education Program, which essentially provides a liaison in schools for youth that are in the system. In 2006, in our legislative package, we were also able to put additional resources for youth in the probation system, because we know that many of the youth in the dependency system cross over in the delinquency system, and in my mind, they do that for a lot of times no reason of their own, no fault of their own. But anyway, in these tough economic times, I think the advocacy that all of us are involved in is particularly important, because when we're facing cutbacks in general, we're certainly concerned about cuts and how they will impact youth in the foster system. And so what I've done in my short time in Washington, D.C., is trying to replicate some of the work that we did in Sacramento. So we have formed a foster care caucus. I'm very excited that there's so many people in Congress that have been working on foster care for many years, that I frankly have a lot of mentors and people who are willing and able to help me. So, of course, establishing a partnership with Senator Landrieu, who I know you will hear from briefly, and working on the Congressional Coalition on Adoption, but forming a caucus on foster care, specifically with my Republican colleague, Tom Marino, as well as Congressmember Michelle Bachmann, and then on the Democratic side, Congressmember Jim McDermott. All of those individuals have many years of involvement in foster care policy. We just had our first briefing that gave us the state of foster care nationally from the perspective of the administration. We're going to have another briefing in a few weeks looking at the state of foster care from the perspective of the advocates. And then next year, and this is one thing that I wanted to raise to the people that are involved in the webcast, we want to go around the country and we want to look at best practices and most challenging situations. And so hopefully we can stay connected to the people that are participating in this effort today, because you might be able to give us some examples of cities that we can visit around the country. So once again, thank you so much for your work, and look forward to continuing to be involved.
Thank you, Representative Bass. Thank you so much for joining us. And now we go from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., where we have a wonderful group of leaders, both coming out of the foster care system directly and helping those in the foster care system. We have Senators Mary Landrieu, Senator Chuck Grassley, and Assistant Secretary of the Administration of Children and Families, George Sheldon. So thank you so much for joining us. It's such an honor to hear from all of you, and we'd love you, Senator Landrieu, to kick it off and get us going from D.C. What's going on up there?
Well, thank you, Daniel. And first of all, let me thank CCAI and the universities that are involved in this really extraordinary national conversation on a subject that's so very, very important. Now, we have 500,000 children in foster care, and while it's a big number, it represents just a very small percentage of all children in America. So most certainly, with all of our help and our good ideas, we can improve the outcomes for these children that are actually, the time that they're in foster care, they are in the custody of the government. And so we have a special obligation, I believe, to these children. 100,000 approximately of the 500,000 have had their parental rights terminated, and we need to be looking for homes for them, permanent homes. That's why I'm so pleased to be the chair of the Foster Care Caucus with Senator Grassley, my good friend from Iowa. He and I have sponsored many pieces of, I think, important legislation. We've worked together, Senator, to get other colleagues involved in this issue, and I'm proud to tell all of you, because of the work that you do, there's growing interest in Congress, Republicans and Democrats, that are interested in promoting reforms in this area. And with just the 2 minutes that I have left, I want to focus on, and I've been asked to focus on, just two specific areas that I think we could, based on what the foster youth tell me, where we could improve. And one of them, most certainly, is working to help foster children stay in the schools that they were originally enrolled in before they were pulled into foster care, particularly if that is a quality school or a school that they have built relationships. You all know the statistics. I don't have to share this with you, but foster children move 1 to 2 times per year. Over a third of young adults who age out of foster care can report having moved 5 times in their life. Only 3% of foster care children receive a bachelor's degree. That is much lower than the national average for all children. And part of it is not because they don't want to work hard. It's not because they aren't bright enough. It's because if you had to move 4 times in elementary school and 5 times in high school, you might fall behind as well. It's emotionally very difficult. So we have a bill in to correct that right now pending. And then I think attracting, the other issue is fostering and mentorship, trying to provide foster children with a mentor. We'd like them to have a quality foster home, first of all. If they're terminated from their parents, we'd like them to find an adoptive home. But I've got a bill in pending in Congress right now to at least encourage mentorship of foster youth. So those are just 2 issues that I think and there are others, and the other panel will speak about those, but those were the 2 issues that I wanted Daniel to bring to your attention. And because we're reauthorizing elementary and secondary education, there's an opportunity right now in Washington to get this fixed so that foster kids can stay in the school that best suits them. It's not easy, it's a little complicated because the departments have to work together. But as Karen said, and I so appreciate her leadership, Congresswoman Bass, I think we can do that. And Senator Grassley is now here with me as well.
Thank you. Thank you all for this opportunity that we have to share ideas. First of all, the institution of a caucus in the United States Congress is generally for the benefit of members of Congress to have dialogue. But this caucus on foster youth was set up so that youth would have a forum, and we would benefit in the Congress as policymakers from that forum, getting ideas from people who live that life every day as foster children. And a long time before the caucus was set up, dealing on foster care, one of the things that I learned from people that are in the foster system is that they want permanency, want a mom and a dad and a home. And I can understand that. But the caucus on foster youth extends that word permanency beyond just the permanency that comes from a home or a stable relationship. And that is the importance of education. And as Senator Landrieu has said, you know, getting shoved around from one school to another without the needs of the young people being taken into consideration. Because after all, what is the young people in foster care? They're as much a part of the future generation and the future of our country and the stability of our society as anybody else that's not in the foster care system. And to make sure that everybody has equal opportunity, education is so very important. And having a stable relationship that's carried on throughout the school year, as well as whatever home they're in, is very, very important. And so we want to bring attention to that because education is so important. It's the key to getting ahead. And why shouldn't the talent and the gifts that foster children have to give to everybody else just as important as people that aren't in the foster care system? And that's what the Caucus on Foster Youth is all about. And I thank you for that forum, and thanks Senator Landrieu for the hard work that she does as well.
And Daniel, I think you want me now maybe to introduce the other panelist that's with us?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Well, we are very, very honored to have the Assistant Secretary for Health and Family Issues here in Washington, Assistant Secretary George Sheldon, who before he was the Secretary for the country, Assistant Secretary for the country, actually ran the department in the state of Florida. And he and I had just an opportunity for the 10 minutes before we were waiting to come on to exchange a couple of really good ideas. And I'm so proud to say that I think that Secretary Sebelius has chosen a wonderful leader right now for our country to help bring his experience from Florida, where he had a lot of reforms in foster care just a few years ago, working with Governor Charlie Crist, to come bring some of those ideas to Washington. So he's trained as an attorney. He's very knowledgeable in all of these areas. So I turn it over to Assistant Secretary Sheldon.
Senator, thank you. I want to thank Senator Landrieu and Senator Grassley for the leadership they provided. And I think when you look at this issue from a national standpoint, Congress really has been on the cutting edge with the Fostering Connections Act that really established education as a priority in the foster care system, with the most recent Child and Family Services Innovation Improvement Act to really allow us to use 4E dollars, allow the states to use 4E dollars to provide transportation. Because I think Senator Grassley pointed out very well, the key of stability in education is the ability to stay in the same school. When you have a child who moves from home to home to home and school to school to school, it is very hard and very difficult to have a stable educational learning experience. When I first went to the department in Florida, I sat down with about 15 young people who'd aged out of the foster care system for what turned out to be 2.5 hours. And I think I probably learned more from those 15 kids about what was happening in foster care than I've learned from all the professionals. And I'm not taking anything away from professionals, but we designed a whole foster care system in this country, and we never talked to kids. And most recently, and again I would compliment both senators and the Congress for putting together the Congressional Internship Program. Because now you've got interns on the Hill, not only getting experience, interns who've been in the foster care system, but also having an impact on congressional thinking. We had 4 of those young people out to the department just this week. They sat down with some of the leadership and a lot of the individuals, but what they really talked about were, what are the things that we could do to make this work better? They talked about being homeless. They talked about the impact of psychotropic medications. But one of the key things they talked about was educational stability. When you've got too many of these kids are aging out of foster care without a permanent home, and they're aging out without a high school education. And that it is very difficult. Anyone in our society knows it's very difficult to find a job, to get experience. It's difficult anyway right now with the times we're in, but it's more difficult if you're coming out without a high school education. So I'm optimistic about where we're headed. I do think that there are a lot of really good foster parents in this country who reach out, who open up their home, potentially want to become adoptive parents. But we've got to connect that foster parent with the education system. It is important for the education system to be sharing information with the child welfare system and vice versa. Information is power. You can still have confidentiality, but the extent to which we can make that child the center priority, then I think, and education a key part of that, then I think we can really move this system forward. Thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to be with you.
And Daniel, just the final thing I'd like to say, and I know you're going to turn it over to the other, the young people on the panel, is, the families that they come from may be broken, but it doesn't mean the children themselves are broken. And I think if we can keep that in mind, that many of these children in foster care are strong, they're resilient, they're smart, they're hardworking, but we treat them as if they're broken. It's the families around them that are broken, and that is a problem. We're going to try to strengthen their families, but when we can't, we have to give them an opportunity to be in a stronger setting. Foster family, adoptive family, but still to have those strong arms around them so that they can live up to the potential that they all have. And thank you so much.
Could I make one short point, please? And that is that for us in public policy and in government, and this is requiring a great deal of cooperation between at least two agencies of the federal government, HHS and Education. It requires a great deal of cooperation between the federal government and state government, and within state government, collaboration between state government and what local school districts are doing. So you don't always get that sort of cooperation very easy, but I hope that these young people expressing what it takes for them to get ahead will dictate to every level of government that we have to have greater cooperation and not the usual independence that we have of one agency of government not necessarily cooperating with the other.
Thank you, Senator.
Daniel, on that point, because I would like to follow up, we're doing a national summit with the Department of Education and the child welfare system the 1st of November, so that at least the federal government can send the message that education and the child welfare system are prepared to work together.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. It was wonderful to hear from Senators Grassley and Landrieu and the Assistant Secretary. It's pretty incredible to think about the conversation we're having today, which involves state-level leaders, national leaders, people on the ground. What we're really seeing here is a continuum of ability to make it better for these kids on all levels. And that's kind of what we wanted to do, the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, as well as Fostering Media Connections with the help of our gracious leaders to talk about that this is really possible. As we're dealing with reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, with the Administration for Children and Families coming together with the Department of Education for this national summit, you're entering a moment of pretty unparalleled and unprecedented momentum around the subject matter. So it's great to hear from DC and hear what they're talking about, that momentum building from the top down and from the bottom up like we're doing here. We're going to take it back to DC in a second, where we're going to hear from Derek Riggins, who was a foster youth intern with the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute. We will also hear from Madison Sandoval-Lunn, who was as well a CCAI, a Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute foster youth intern. And we're going to hear from Christina Miranda. I know that Madison was on Fox News yesterday, so you're used to this kind of attention. So why don't you guys kick it off and tell us what you're thinking from DC? Derek?
Many times when children come into the foster care system, they feel they are written off and often forgotten. Education is one such example. Children in foster care feel written off. Studies show that 75% of children in foster care are working below grade level, 35% are in special education, 46% do not complete high school, as compared to 16% of non-foster youth, and as few as 15% attend college. These numbers are not acceptable, and we can do better. I once read a quote that said, "We worry about what a child will become tomorrow, yet we forget that he is someone today." Education is an important tool that a child needs for the rest of their life, and a tool that can help shape their future and provide a way out. Oftentimes, when children come into this system because of no fault of their own, their education suffers along with other things. It is not enough to only deal with the physical and mental issues that young people face in the system, but we must address why so many kids in foster care are falling behind academically. I was always taught that when you're given something, you should leave it better than how you found it. If your own child was performing below grade level and not meeting your expectation or reaching their full potential, you would do everything in your power to help them reach their full potential. Ways we can help make a difference is by holding states accountable for the educational outcome for kids in foster care. Currently, the CFSR has only one question in regards to education for kids in foster care. The question reads, do children receive appropriate services to meet their educational needs? This statement alone does not uncover information such as what is the state doing to determine what particular services are appropriate to meet the child's needs? Does the state effectively provide such services? And are the services effective? These are all important questions that can help improve the child welfare system. A report published by the Legal Center for Foster Care and Education found that during round 1 of the CFSR, 34 states were found not in sustainable conformity with the question about education on the CFSR. Round 2 of the CFSR began in 2007. Of the 9 states whose round 2 final reports were published, only 2 states, Massachusetts and North Carolina, have been found in sustainable conformity. It is not enough to know what the problem is, but we must address the problem. The CFSR holds a lot of weight, and I believe that if we put a focus on education, we can improve the outcome for kids in care. An unknown author said that education is unique among the consumer products. When it fails to work as advertised, it is the customer who gets labeled as defective. Let's remove the labels that are placed on foster youth and invest in their education future and a bright tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Derek. Thank you for that. Madison, how are you?
Good afternoon. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. Today I'm talking about special education and foster youth. Foster youth are often overrepresented and underserved when it comes to special education services. They are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with special needs compared to their non-foster care counterparts. The misdiagnosis often is a result of placement instability that puts foster children behind academically. There is also a lack of resources and academic support to help children catch up. Once misdiagnosed, they are less likely than their peers to get any actual special services. The Individuals with Disabilities Act provides for the enforcement of rights through parents' advocacy. Parents have a host of procedural rights designed to empower them to obtain appropriate services for their child from their school districts. There is a gap in parent advocacy for children in foster care who have special needs. There is no oversight to make sure that someone assumes responsibility to advocate for a child's educational rights. Here are my following policy recommendations. The Congress should encourage states to create a surrogate program that would oversee the identification of an appropriate and qualified surrogate parent for every child who has or may have a disability and who is in the custody of the state. A surrogate parent or an educational advocate would be best suited in identifying the programs and services that would help a child maximize his or her potential in education. As mentioned yesterday on Fox News, my brother is very dear to my heart, and he was placed in the special education system, and he was far behind reading level and math level. It wasn't until he was adopted and someone actually saw the potential in him and took him out of the special education program and placed him in independent studies. Now he's up to reading level, math level, and he has college in his sights. There is no reason why we shouldn't give this same type of privilege and opportunity to all foster youth.
Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you. Madison, thank you. Maybe we can hear from Christina as well. Thank you so much. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you for having me today. I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience. I went through 10 different foster homes, and I also been through 10 different schools. That's triple the amount of these schools that the general population attends, which is 1 elementary, 1 middle, and 1 high school. When I was placed in foster care, I remember being in elementary and middle school, and the most important thing to me at that time was permanency, like being connected to my family or someone that I knew that could normalize the situation for me. I think that we really need to help these youth stay in their school of origins and support that. I think a practical solution to that is being able to use like family finding or family group decision making and really keeping it at the roots. There's already established resources there for these youth that can be there for them and take them to school or take them to their extracurricular activities and really monitor how they're doing in school and help them to achieve in school. Also, I worked as a CPS worker, and everyone involved, all parties, guardian ad litem, the judge, the provider agencies, caseworkers, whomever, reported to me, and I reported to the court, and I had these court packets, and under the education section, there was just a line saying that the child was doing well in school, and it was never an issue or never questioned unless the child was being truant or they failed out of school or they failed a grade. So I think there really needs to be more of a collective effort. I think people really need to advocate and really monitor these children's how they're doing in school.
Christina, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you foster youth interns with the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute. Derek, Madison, Christina, you guys are real leaders, and it's great to see that the youth voice that we have here at Cosumnes River College, that we have here in Sacramento, we have in Washington State, and Virginia, and everywhere else is really being heard on the federal level. And this is one of the greatest gifts that the Congressional Coalition has been able to do is pulling off this foster youth internship program, which has seen hundreds of young people go through it and be able to really advocate for the needs of foster youth at the federal level. And I know that here we have Jatane Hart, who is also a foster youth intern, who use that opportunity to really put a bug in people's ear, and that's very important. So thank you all. Thank you so much for joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we'll take it back to Sacramento, right here where we are in live reality after all this web stuff. And I want to talk a little bit about we've talked about what's going on the federal level. We've talked a bit about what can happen on the state level. We heard from Representative Bass talking about her experiences and from coming from the State House here in California and moving up to Congress. We've also heard from federal level leadership, both in the administration as well as elected leadership, talking about what they can do from the top levels. But really, this is a big continuum. Cheryl from Chapin Hall was also discussing the individual level as well as the system level work that needs to be done. And when we think about these things, it's important not to always think that they are impossible solutions to find, but rather that they are completely attainable solutions to find. So right now we have Carrie Summer and Mike Jones, who are from the Courageous Connection program. Mike founded this program kind of out of an understanding that you knew something needed to happen, right? So Mike, what was the turning point for you? When did it happen, and how did that happen?
I think realistically, I just happened to find myself in the right place at the right time. One of the things that, as I was teaching and working through discipline, I spent a couple years as a discipline coordinator at the high school, and what we saw was a lot of our kids that were going into on-campus suspension and being sent home were, although the foster youth make up only 1% or 1.5% of the school population, they make up a significantly larger percent of the discipline issue population. And after speaking to the kids, and Secretary Sheldon had said that he learned more talking to a handful of aged out youth than he had talking to professionals, and I had the same experience. As I talked to the kids, all the great ideas that all the adults had, the kids kind of got lost in the red tape. And it wasn't something that maybe my own maturity level dealing with the kids I was spending most of my time with kind of took me away from that red tape perspective and put me in this perspective of working with the kids one-on-one, seeing them on a daily basis, and realizing that there was too much red tape. And there were too many hurdles and people saying it was too difficult to make a change, when in reality, all that really needs to happen is the kids need to have a voice. And that was one of the things that, as I started learning, as I continue to learn, the more I hear from our foster youth and our former foster youth directly, the more it becomes evident on what can be done to change the system and outcomes. Carrie was a prime example of that. When I first met Carrie, and it's been probably 5 years ago, he was an angry Mohawk, standoffish personality, and it was a protective mechanism, and I luckily was able to see through that, and speaking to him one-on-one, found this beautiful person that was hidden behind layers of hurt and neglect and broken promises. And reaching inside that and actually working one-on-one and having a conversation, I got to see a part of him that I don't know that he had seen in himself for quite a while. And what we've managed to do now is we're working, on a site-to-site level. It's no longer about statistics. It's no longer about numbers. It's about individual kids and individual lives and what they need and what they can give to the rest of us. Because, I'm a far better person now because of kids like Carrie than I was before. They've got much more to offer than I think a lot of people realize. One of the big things that I've seen issues with is foster youth themselves have a negative stigma they carry around about being in care. It's an embarrassment. It's something that a lot of kids are ashamed of, and there's no reason for that. I think kids are embarrassed, and kids don't realize, and I've seen in a lot of different schools, how many foster youth actually attend their schools. And what we've done at multiple schools is we get all the foster youth together so they can see how many are at one high school. How many kids in your classroom or that you walk across campus with are actually in care and know what you're going through. And that in and of itself has kind of eliminated this lonely feeling, like you're the only one. You're struggling and nobody understands what's going on and nobody cares. When you realize that you're not alone, you can start to stand on your own and believe that you're not a statistic. You're not a negative stigma. You're a group that's strong and powerful, and we've managed to give a voice to a lot of those kids, and we see huge changes because of that. And this one's a perfect example of that, because I've seen in 5 years, I've seen him grow into a man, and a man that, on a personal level and professional level and just an existence level, a respectful man. So it's a good thing.
So Mike, you took the time to reach out individually, on a one-on-one level, and that's something that probably everybody could do. And who knows if everybody's doing that, right? That's something that's we need to kind of encourage that kind of stuff. This is a culture that does not necessarily celebrate those in the helping services, but I can tell you that teachers and social workers are my biggest heroes. So that you were able to do that really speaks to what's possible. I know, Jatane, you're doing that on the level of a mentor, as an academic mentor. Carrie, and if you can speak up because we've got the mic here, but just kind of tell us what was up with the Mohawk. What was up with that, and where what were you trying to, what were you thinking when you met Mike?
Well, the Mohawk, that was just kind of my signature thing that made me stand out to people. Really looking back on it, I had to bring the Mohawk, the black plastic glasses, because people would notice me. I wasn't just, just somebody walking through. And I went into Mike's classroom, and I didn't think much of it at the time. And then talking to him and listening to the ideas he had and how he presented everything, I just felt like I needed to stick around him. And through that, some of the craziest stuff in my life where most people would just drop and give up, he's helped me push through everything. And at this point, I live on my own, 19, full-time job, all that great stuff. So he's really helped me out a lot.
So you were basically trying to get attention by wearing the black glasses and having the Mohawk, and Mike took the time to do that. Had you seen that in other people?
Black plastic glasses?
No, not the black plastic glasses. No, but was that a common occurrence where you had somebody come into your life and try to mentor you in that way?
Not at all. I went to foster homes and group homes yeah, there were people who, you know, they'd have their favorite kids in the house, but nobody really took the time to try and actually help anybody progress through life. And I kind of had to take it upon myself. I mean, I was at one group home where I knew I was going to get absolutely nowhere there. And I called my social worker and I said, I got to get out of here today. I'm not going to get anywhere. I need to go somewhere where I can progress. And that day I got moved to another place, and I really did do well there. But then there's the process of you get moved again and again. I just kind of drew a blank.
Yeah, so moving around was a big problem. And Mike, what is the exact setup of Courageous Connection? I mean, so, you know, Carrie's one example, right, of a whole continuum of work that you're doing. I mean, this is you've created a whole thing that's now expanded. So what exactly is your mission, and how exactly do you go about tackling that?
You know, I'm not that special. As a teacher, everybody that, you know, almost every teacher that ever becomes a teacher because they care about kids and they want to make a difference. One of the things we've done with Courageous Connection is to educate teachers and administrators about foster care and foster youth that are in the school systems. One of the problems is, as a teacher, when you go through and get your teaching credential, or you go through and you get an administrative credential, foster youth are never mentioned. You get trained on behavior issues and suspensions and things like that, but the foster youth population is never brought up. And one of the reasons, I think, is because it is such a small portion of that population, but I think it's also because there's so many misunderstandings. There's so much lack of communication that people don't know, and it was said earlier about data sharing. I've spoken with multiple social workers now and people in the system, and as a school employee, as a teacher, as an administrator, you legally have data on the kids. You have their behavior and their grades, and social workers get that data too, but very seldom is there a conversation where you share that and you speak to each other and you realize that, you know, as a teacher, I see this kid 5 days a week, you know, all school year long. As a social worker, because of caseloads and things, you might be able to see a kid every other week or every month. When we communicate, we realize that, you know, we can know the kid a lot better. So one of our goals is to train as many teachers and administrators in what it is, you know, what it means to be a foster youth and what it doesn't mean. Because as I've seen with other teachers and as we open up more doors of communication, as a foster youth, when you, say, have a home visit over the weekend, if your bio parents don't show up or something goes wrong, you come to school on Monday upset. And you blow out of a classroom, and if nobody knows what's going on and nobody's taking the time to understand that, then you lose a kid for a day or a week. And then when that kid comes back, they're turned off anyway because you don't understand. So one of our huge goals is to open those doors of communication and train teachers and administrators and high school counselors, and then on the same, or on a different side of the coin, train social workers in the system that you can speak to the high schools. You can speak to the school system. It seems that there's like a fear, an unspoken fear that as a social worker you can't really talk to the high school because they're not your people. Or as a teacher you can't really talk to a social worker because that's not your people. When in, you know, at the end of the day, the only people we should be concerned about are the kids that are kind of getting lost in that red tape. So, you know, a big movement for us is going to be to open those communication gaps and to let people know things can change. It's not that difficult. It's not a big, huge undergoing. It's a matter of listening and looking at kids and seeing them as kids and not problems and drains on the system or a paycheck. So.
Well, I mean, Mike, thank you for that. I would like to open up the floor to questions from anybody in the audience about kind of what they've seen today and what they think. You know, I know, Kim, you know, you've got some ideas about communication. What's going on in terms of communication in Sacramento County? How does that work?
Well, I'm in one of the core programs here in the Elk Grove Unified School District. So the core programs communicate about foster youth services and what the needs are for the students. We're also part of the Sacramento County Office of Education Foster Youth Collaborative. So we also participate at the level of agencies communicating. That would be probation, social services, mental health, and all the school districts in this county. Then there's also, again, the further expansion of communication statewide with all of the other county Office of Education programs. Our program is only one of 6 in the state that are at a school district level. And so we have a bit more flexibility to work within the school district to provide those services or customize the services. Hence the connection with Mike, creating a position for him to be able to expand his model that he started at Laguna Creek to all of our high schools, to encourage the one-on-one and closeness and working with the foster youth to help be more successful. So there's a lot of discussion both locally and statewide, and continuing the services, expanding the services to make sure that each of the foster youth service programs have some type of involvement with the youth themselves, bringing them in through different realms, either as a AmeriCorps member, as part of foster youth services, being on the task force at both the county and state levels, to bring in and focus on what are the needs, what areas should we be really putting our funds into, and focusing on what the needs of the youth are, really listening to them one-on-one. So that's what we're doing.
Thanks, thank you. And Jatane, you come out of Alameda County, right? Office of Education. So, what is your kind of impression of communication, and how do you work to really, do that every day?
Well, I think what's really unique about our program, Alameda County Office of Education, has collaborative with foster youth services as well, and so we really do have the opportunity to have open dialogue. Being part of the Office of Education as a mentor, we have access to a lot of the records and behavior. A lot of things are going on at the schools for young people. I can go into school, get attendance records, get behavior records, get all of that immediately, and then also being able to talk to, because of the collaboration with foster youth services, talk to social workers and really share that information. And what I've really noticed is that teachers and administrators, they really welcome us coming and talking to them, because a lot of times these young people do fly under the radar and they don't get seen unless they're having behaviors. And so a teacher doesn't know that they may need a little bit extra help or a little bit of this. And so for me coming in and saying, just even introducing myself, saying I'm an educational mentor, I work with this young person, they go, oh, there's another support person, someone I can call, who I can say, we're having this issue, or this youth is falling behind, what can we do? And they're willing to work. And so being able to really make that connection and talk to teachers, administrators, principals, they really appreciate it. And I think it's really unique in our in Alameda County that we have the collaboration.
So, how is it for you coming from, the kind of seeing everything from the systems level down to this level? Not down, I'm just saying.
I think what's really important for me is becoming from the policy arena and really then coming down to direct service is really being able to see what the young people go through. It's different because you hear it, and a lot of times in DC you hear young people who have been, taught to speak in front of people. And so I'm working with the young people who don't have a voice normally and who have fallen so far behind the cracks. When I say young people with 0 credits, those are the same young people who come to DC and talk to the policymakers. These are kids who get left in the cracks and no one ever finds them. And so really getting to see that and really use that experience and what they're telling me and what their experience is to improve the system is really important.
Yes?
I work in a foster care agency that's all over Northern California and been doing that since about 1822. And the trend in the industry that we see is that more group homes are closing. More children are coming from group home care into what we call intensive foster care, where the parents are more highly trained to work with these children, and they have no capability of even thinking about being in the public school system. So what do we do with this issue as more and more of these really special needs kids come into foster care?
So the question is they're not even in the public education system. So
Not at this point.
Not at this point. So how do you get them into the public education system,
Well,
or how do you deal with kids with special needs? I mean, Jatane, are you dealing with that at all?
I deal with a lot of young people with special needs. I think maybe probably 6 of my young women had IEPs, and so really, you know, what I really enjoy is the fact we do TDMs a lot, and we do a lot of meetings with educational teams. A lot of times we have some pretty great social workers in Alameda County who really do involve every person who's in their life to talk about education. I think you're right in terms of saying that it's hard to meet all of the educational needs. We have a lot of schools that are closing down public schools, and so some of these schools, a lot of public schools aren't offering all of the special needs services that young people who have special needs are needing, and so it's really difficult for us as well sometimes to find where we can get those services. And I don't know the answer. I think that we're working on that, and I think that each district is thinking about how can we better serve these young people. The county's definitely thinking about it. Social services is also thinking about it, and I think it's a conversation that needs to continue.
Yeah, Mike, how do we get one of you in 8 northern counties?
It's not, I don't think it's that difficult, because I think if you open up, it's a communication thing. If you open up that communication and you ask, there are always people around. And with this special education thing, one of the things I've seen, and I'm sure Jatane sees it also, is there's a disproportionality that occurs with foster youth and special education or behavioral issues. And it's not because those youth are necessarily learning disabled or uncontrollable. You have to take into consideration, and I don't think this happens enough, is that you're dealing with kids that have missed tremendous amounts of school. They're not going to be at grade level when they've missed 3 to 4 years of schooling to get them at a 9th grade level, and they never got to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade level education. They can't function like a 9th grader, not because they're unable, but because the system has not educated them to the point where they need to be. And then you see a lot of kids, I think, a disproportionate amount of foster youth in ED or behavior programs. You'd be angry too. I mean, if every step of your life has been failed or broken promises or pain and hurt, you're going to grow up and be an angry kid. You're not going to want people around you, because why let somebody in when they're just going to disappoint you like everybody else?
I don't think it's the system's fault they haven't been educated. I think it's because they've become so emotionally traumatized by their incredibly dysfunctional home that they can't sit down in a classroom and be taught. I was in a home yesterday in Magalia where they've had 50 special needs foster kids.